Public Nemesis Media.
This is a map of the Third Reich at its territorial peak. Most of Europe was under direct control of the Nazis or had a pro-Nazi government, and in 1942 the western area of the Soviet Union was under threat of becoming a part of Funny Mustache Man's empire. Much like in every other war in the past 100 years, the Nazis had their own propaganda with which they tried to get as many people as possible on their side and help them in their invasion of the USSR. What was one of the weapons used by them in order to achieve their goals? Pan-Europeanism. The Pan-European idea isn't necessarily an evil idea, even though I personally don't support it. The swastika wasn't originally a symbol of evil, but it was appropriated by the Nazis and it became that. Pan-Europeanism was much more lucky in that regard. However, it was still a tool used in fascist propaganda. Now, you're most likely familiar with Nazi racial theories about the Aryan race and the Nordic race and all that. As someone who spent some time reading their theories on different races, there's one thing I can confidently say to every single one of you. The theories make absolutely no sense. It's not just because of the racism and pseudoscience, but also because they were very, very inconsistent. Nazis viewed Slavs as inferior, yet wanted to Germanize some of them. Nazis despised Jews, yet had soldiers with Jewish ancestry. If you were useful to them, they'd make an exception. Matter of fact, fascists use this tactic even today. I've read many stories from all kinds of people who became a part of some far-right circle, and when they protested against hateful rhetorics from those far-right circles against their people, they were told how they don't mean them, or the classic, "You're one of the good ones." In my previous video, I talked about how Nazis tried to spread their ideology in occupied Serbia, a Slavic country that wasn't viewed favorably by them. The propaganda was based on posters with different messages, one of the messages being how Germany is actually defending you. From who? From the Bolsheviks, from the Jews, and from the Bolshevik Jews. Here's a poster that states how Bolshevism would be the end of the Serbs and how only Germany can protect us from Bolshevism. Here's one that shows how Europe is protecting its culture from Bolshevism, and here's one that tried to show the entire thing as a life or death situation. Imagine your only options being Bolshevism and Nazism. Anyways, this poster talked about what would happen if either of these ideologies won the war. If Bolshevism wins, then Serbia would become an unimportant Soviet republic where everyone would be sadistically killed by the Mongol flood. Remember that for later. On the other side is National Socialism. If that ideology wins the war, then Serbia will become a member of a big European family where everything will be fine and dandy under a United Europe. This kind of propaganda was shown everywhere the Nazis stepped foot on. There's a plot against Europe orchestrated by Bolsheviks and Jews, and the only way to stop them is to fight alongside the Aryan Nazis who are defending the superior European civilization from the Soviets. That leads us to this abomination known as der Untermensch, which translates to the subhuman. That was a brochure printed in millions of copies during Operation Barbarossa, where the Soviets and other Nazi enemies were painted as subhumans.
We're human, and those guys most definitely aren't.
It attacks everyone from Churchill and Stalin, through the non-Aryan and therefore non-European Jews, to Mongoloid people. Whoever made this travesty clearly hated, and I mean hated, Asians. Firstly, an Untermensch is described as a creature that looks like a human, but is spiritually and psychologically lower than animals. This creature is then presented as something filled with uncontrollable rage and hatred towards humans, and they will bring the downfall of the West. It's pretty obvious how openly this brochure dehumanizes the Soviets. Now, who's presented as the first Untermenschen? Attila and Genghis Khan. You know, the Mongoloid conquerors. Their Hunnic hordes are talked about in this brochure, which paints them as animals that fought against Europe and left destruction everywhere they went. On one page, it mentions how Russian steppes were quite fertile, as much as Germany, but it wasn't taken care of because Germany was populated by men while Russia was populated by undermen. The dehumanization of Russians only gets worse when they're presented as Huns, the same Huns as Attilas, who have now returned to create chaos again.
Ich glaube, wir dürfen nicht vergessen, dass auch wenn Russen europäisch aussehen, dass es keine Europäer sind.
All of this isn't new. Mein Kampf talks about how Germans were culturally superior and how Germany should expand to the east. There are also Nazi racial theories how Russians aren't Aryans because they apparently mixed with Mongols. These Russo-Mongols want to destroy many different European nations, and the Nazis are here to prevent Europe falling into madness. More anti-Asian propaganda comes in the form of "let's save ourselves from this type" and "women like this Aryan lady will be the mothers of Europe." Finally, you get some pictures of dead bodies, followed by messages of how the undermen will attack the women of Europe like they had these Russian women, and how they will murder European children like they had this boy. Defend yourself, Europe, is the final message of the brochure. Look, I'm not saying that the Soviet Union was a heaven on earth, but what the Nazis would do is conquer some lands, cause destruction there, record that destruction, and then blame it on others, making their propaganda disingenuous. I mean, it's clear as day just how much of a pose their self-made image of European defenders is, how their narrative of a large European family protected by the Third Reich is nothing more than a pathetic disguise for their imperial goals and their hatred for the ones they deemed inferior.
I'm superior, that's all. You just gotta know it. You're just walking in here, no one even asked for you to show up and give your opinion, but you did it anyway, you prick.
Funny how these subhumans have somehow defeated the racially superior Nazis, although I have to mention that Western powers have helped too. Sadly, there are some people that even today exploit the concept of Pan-Europeanism by spreading hate and indoctrinating other people into hating specific groups of people deemed as not European and uncivilized, but that's a whole other topic. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. The end of this year is just around the corner, so I'll try to make one larger video before 2023 ends. I definitely want to end this amazing year on a really high note. Stay tuned for more content. Goodbye.